Hello everyone, it is Caitlin, and today we are making a reproduction shift based on the original 1820s and 1830s shift I have in my collection. Let's get started. So, I have here some linen, and we're going to cut out this original shift, which I suppose I should show you that first. Here she is, from the 1820s to 1830s. Now I've shown pictures on Instagram before. It's a very simple square chemise shift, entirely made of linen, and of course it's entirely hand sewn. So there are some ties in here, so both the back and the front were tied at some point. One of the ties actually came off not too long ago. It's right here. I have it saved, and I'm eventually probably going to stitch it back in just to make sure all the pieces stay together. This one of them, I think it's this one. This one still has a tie in there, but it's like entirely in there. This one's partially come out, so you can actually see where the tie was. But this is the shift that we're going to try to mimic. The only difference is we're going to make this in my size because it needs to be in my size. So we're going to need some pieces here. We're going to need a front panel and a back panel that are basically exactly the same, except for the front one is about 1.5 inches shorter than the back panel. They, let's see, I'll show you. This part down here is selvage to selvage, right? It's hard to get on camera, but from this edge to this edge is selvage, and then it kind of graduates itself in a little bit, which we are going to mimic. But I need a front and a back panel. I need shoulder seams. Now you can do this without the shoulder seam. The Workwoman Guide actually does show a chemise where you basically just cut one long piece that you folded in half, so there's no seam up here, and you cut out the necklines, which works perfectly well. I did that in my last shift video. Actually, not the last shift video. It was actually 2 1830 shift videos ago, because this is my third one. So I have, at the end of this video, I shall have 6 chemises, which is a pretty good number in my opinion. So I have here some, this is a cotton linen blend. It's not entirely linen, but a cotton linen blend that is, again, 60 inches wide. And I'm going to start by evening off this top. There we go. What we need to do as far as measuring goes, it's going to depend on how tall you are. So basically find where on your body you want the shift to end in the front and the back. Well, let's do back first. Where you want to end in the back and how long you want it. We're going to add 1/2 inch to the top for seam allowance, and then 1 inch to the bottom for seam allowance, or the hem, really. So we're going to take our measurement and add 1.5 inches. Now I am roughly her same height, maybe slightly shorter than her, but I'm going to go ahead and use her shift measurement. So hers was 38.5 inches long, and so I'm going to cut mine 40 inches. Alright, so we have that. I am going to cut right up here, because again we're cutting our fabric in half to make it more on par with the original width. Alright, now I have 2 panels that are 30 inches wide by 40 inches long. So they're basically giant rectangles right now. I'm going to find the 20-inch mark. Now we're going to hollow out the top part, because remember the top part was graduated down, and then this part was on the selvage, or at least the edge. Alright, so what I'm going to do for this part is take my bust measurement, which for me is 42, and I'm going to add some ease to it. Not a ton of ease, but let's just say, let's make it 50 inches. So my fabric width is 60, and so that means I need to take 10 inches off. Well, this is in 4 pieces, so that's roughly going to be 2.5 inches per piece. Roughly what that means is that I need to cut this, if I have this on the edge, I need to cut it around 12.5 inches, which is roughly right here. So we're going to start here, and we're going to graduate it up that way till we hit my pen. And you can see this is not very precise. There we go. Alright. So these are going to be our little gussets at the bottom of the hem to give us a little bit more wiggle room to actually move. So one of the first steps I'm going to do is actually to stitch these together. Now, especially these on the selvage, she just did is just whipped them very closely together. And so now I have a front and a back. Now I am going to unfold this and take away, let's say that's going to be the back. So the front, I need to cut off roughly about 1.5 inches because the front's about 1.5 inches lower on the original. Alright, so now we have a front, a back, and 2 gussets. Alright, next step is I'm going to cut the shoulder parts, which again I need 4 pieces. Again, I'm going to do roughly the same height as the original lady, so I'm going to put what she did, which is going to be 13 with seam allowances, which is going to be 13.5 inches long and 3.5 inches wide. Alright, now we're going to cut the gussets, which I'm going to cut a little bit larger than hers because her, I guess, shoulder width is smaller than mine, so I can technically fit into the chemise, but it's kind of tight, and I would rather mine not be tight. So I'm going to go 6.5, which I think is it's about 7. We're going to go 6.5 down. And now for the sleeves. So I'm going to do her width of sleeve, which with seam allowance is going to be about 6.5 inches. I'm going to lengthen it by about 1 inch because, again, my arm's a little bit bigger than hers and I would like it to not be quite so tight. So I'm going to do 15 inches. So I need something at 6.5 by 15. Alright, so I'm working on the first step, which is to sew the gussets together. So the part that we took off, I cut it down because, of course, it came to like a point, and you can't sew to a point. So I kind of took a seam allowance off, basically. And now I am just, because this is a selvage edge, I don't have to really do a seam allowance. I'm just doing what the original did, which is to whip the edges together very tightly. The other side, I decided to, because the first one on camera, I cut the gusset, which doesn't make any sense because now I have to take a seam allowance. So I decided it'd be better for the folded one just to be, one piece. So the second one I cut 1 piece. So I gotta cut the other one piece as well. So now I gotta use some extra fabric and cut 1 piece, 1 gusset, without seam allowances or without cutting it down the middle. So I won't have to do those at all. So we'll just making 2 chemises. These are better in pairs anyway. So I'll have 1 chemise with the selvage edge that's whipped together and 1 chemise without. I figured that would be the easiest way to make it even. Alright, we're at the next step of putting in the sleeves. So I took my little gusset, it's my little 6.5 inch gusset if I remember, and there's a point, so one side of the sleeve goes up and then directly the other's one. So we have the 2 bottom ones are going to be where we put into the 2 bottom ones are what we're going to put into the actual chemise part. So what I'm going to do is just run a seam about 3/8 of an inch from the raw edge, using as tiny of a stitch as I can while still actually running. I'm getting right now about 4 threads between my stitches, looks like, which is not terrible. I think the original had more like 3, 2 or 3. And when I get to this point, I'm going to stop about a seam allowance's width away from this side. I like to double or triple stitch that because it's a corner. And then I'm going to take this end, match that up, and start sewing back across this way. Alright, and now we're going to fill the seam. So what I'm going to do is turn it. My gusset happens to be the same width as my sleeve, because I made my sleeve the same width as the original sleeve. My gusset had to be a little bit wider because I apparently have a much thicker arm than she did. So her gusset ends about right here, and then she stitched that part together. So what she did is she took the gusset and did the filling seam this way against the sleeve, not the gusset. But this one she put against the gusset and continued up that seam right there. I don't have to do that because my gusset is the exact same length as my sleeve. So I'm going to fill them away from the gusset. And when I'm filling in the original, the sleeve hem is about 1/4 of an inch and then about 3/8 of an inch down. So it's really about 1/2 inch hem total. And this is what it looks like all pinned down. So I have the gussets pinned the way we talked about, and also the sleeve hem. Now I'm going to do mine the easy way, which is not the way she did it. So of course, because she was filling them, and then she had a whole sleeve hem because her gusset ended earlier. She stitched one, then stitched the other, then did the hem. I'm going to be lazy. I'm going to go up here, go all the way around the hem, and go back down here. Which she couldn't have necessarily done just because her gusset, sorry, cattail, ended down here, and she didn't make the jump from hem down to finish that gusset. That would have left random strings everywhere, so she didn't do that. Can you move your tail? No? Okay. You just want pets? Yeah. You were taking a nap on the wool petticoat that I made. Was that comfy? And now I'm trying to work on this. So again, I'm just going to go up here, stop around right here, go all the way around the hem, and then back down here, all in one seam. And then on the sleeve hem, I'm also going to just whip that together. And I'm doing it kind of at an angle instead of straight up and down, and fairly close together. That's what the original shows. So when I pulled up the original, it was very hard to see where her stitches were. They almost looked horizontal with the actual fibers in the fabric. Alright, so we're still on the couch because I'm lazy. I don't feel like going up to the sewing room. So we are now going to put the gores onto the skirt. So this is the front skirt, or chemise front. It's not really a skirt. Okay, it's the bottom half of the chemise. This is the front half. So I did the other side, and what I'm doing is I'm doing what I explained to you earlier, but did a very poor job of it. So instead of putting the pieces that I'm going to fell together, I'm making one slightly down. I'm going to stitch here. That way I don't have to cut it later. Also, I realized that I did the gores wrong. I should have sewn together the diagonal side instead of the straight side. Then sewn the straight side to the skirt edge. I did it opposite, which I'm pretty sure is what the Workwoman's Guide shows, which is probably why I thought about it. And I didn't notice that I did it wrong until I was trying to figure out the whole sleeve and neckline and shoulder piece bits, because that in my brain is not working out to what the original shows. So I'm still working on that, but I have determined that this was done beforehand. So I'm getting to that point, and hopefully as I go along it'll make a little bit more sense to me. I have fixed my mistake of trying to do this from memory, and I have pulled the original chemise and it is sitting next to me on the couch, and that way every seam I do I am double checking now to make sure I'm doing this right. Alright, so that was that. So let's pull it to the other side so I can kind of show you how I'm felling this down. So there it is, and again, this is just the first gusset to the front. So I'm just going to fell it to here. When I sew this to the back, then I'll fell it all the way up, even past that. So still not quite done with the sides, but I'm working on the sleeves now because I need to pin the sleeves in before I put in the gusset. So here's where we're at with the original. So instead of the sleeve being parallel with the neckline as I assumed, it's a little bit off. Now it's 1 inch off in the right sleeve and 1.5 inches off in the left sleeve, which kind of cracks me up a little bit because apparently she wasn't really good at measuring. That aside, I started with the right sleeve, and I'm going to make them both even because I cut all my stuff even, and I don't feel like messing with anything that's going to be uneven or weird. So I'm going to do it the same on both sides because I cut the sides the seams. So maybe she did this on purpose. Maybe her body was just a little odd and one side was taller than the other side. I don't know. But I'm going to make it make sense. So that's where we're at here. So first step is pinning on this part, which is the shoulder piece. So I have my shoulder piece, and I took an inch down from the top of this felled seam on the sleeve, and that's where I'm pinning, well, half an inch below is where I'm pinning the shoulder piece. Now the top of the sleeve is gathered very lightly, so it starts on the front about 3.5 inches up, so I went ahead and pinned that flat. We're going to gather that in a moment. But let's turn her to the back, and on the back it almost matches up with the neckline seam, but not quite. From the top of the neckline, it's about half an inch off. 1 inch from the edge, because I want that seam allowance there. So 1 inch from this edge. So we're including seam allowance in that. And it needs to go below so that was the match right there. Alright. And this one, the gather start, I think it's 3.25 inches. 3 inches from the top of that. Okay. Now when I say lightly gathered, this is the only part we're gathering right here. And you can see it just needs to be very lightly gathered. Now, from about half an inch up to all the way across, about half an inch from the edge on the other side, we're going to do either a double running stitch or a back stitch. I started doing back stitch for like the first inch, realized I didn't want to do that anymore because back stitches take forever. Then I decided to do a double running stitch. I don't know exactly what the original did because I'm not willing to tear her apart to see what she did on the inside, and all that is covered. So that's not going to happen. Alright, so as we make this sleeve, what we're going to do is pin it into the underarm seam. So here's a seam that is stitched. It is not felled yet. We're going to get to that point. But we're going to take where the, we're going to take our sleeve and our gusset, find where the stitching starts, and we're going to just pin that to where the raw edges meet. And we're going to stitch it right where that seam begins, which is about half an inch down. And what I'm going to do is just stitch this down here and then right across back up here. So now the sleeve will be put on. I'm going to stitch and then fell that, and I'm felling it away from the gusset, so it's going to fall this way to have a nice pretty gusset that's going to hang like that. At which point we're going to talk about this whole situation of shoulder seam and all that. I have the other one prepped-ish, kind of all pinned together. This part's going to be a little weird. I haven't quite figured it out. What I think I need to do is, well, I do know, I need to back stitch across here all the way across the entire neckline on both sides. It's going to take forever and a day, but it's, you know, it's what the original shows. And I also need to back stitch up here. Again, it's going to take forever, but we'll do it because that's what the original does, and that's what we're trying to copy. Alright, so working on the neckline. So sleeves are completely in at this point. There's gusset. And I folded over the neckline 1/4 of an inch and then about 3/8 of an inch. And I am stitching it with a whip stitch all the way across on the front and the back. And when I get all of this sewn, what I'm going to do is do a back stitch all the way, starting from this corner all the way across to the other side on both halves. And really, I don't know why she did the step all the way across, because it's not exactly needed. And I get why she did it here, that's to keep these pieces together. But I don't know why she went all the way across. Alright, on the inside of the sleeve, we need to sew this facing down. And now we get to go all the way across, or up, and then back across. Alright, and on the hem, I turned up the hem 1/4 of an inch, and then another 3/8 inch. So it's a 1/2 inch hem total. We're going to whip it, just like we have been doing with like the sleeves and all that. And after this, all we have to do is the embroidery. Well, I feel like I'm going blind over here, but I'm really just trying to get this embroidery done. It's not cooperating. I mean, it is. I just can't see. The original has it's skipping 2 threads. So skipping 2 threads all the way down and just like counting all that out is making my head hurt. I'm using the Workwoman's Guide embroidery, and that probably wasn't the best idea because this ends up being a lot smaller than the originals, but it's still giving you my name marked. So I'm going to leave it, and perhaps with the next one I will use a different set of instructions for the letters. Because I'm putting my own initials, not her initials. If I was actually copying hers specifically, I would use her initials, but I'm putting my initials on this. And I'm using silk embroidery floss for this. Just a single thread, that's what she used. Hers was more of a brown color, and I might have to turn the camera off so I can actually see what I'm doing for the rest of it. But I have a little bit more of that H to do, and I have the K. I also need to go back and put a little dot right after each letter, because she did. So we are going to copy that part. And also what we need to do is put in ties. I put ties in the back. But after I get the embroidery done, we'll come back and do the ties in the front. Alright, there are the initials. They actually look really good. So I'm actually very happy with that. Yes, they're smaller than the originals, but they're not actually that much smaller, and I'm overall very happy with it. So let's put in some ties. So what the original did was just to make a little hole, probably with an awl, similar to this one. Not breaking the fibers, just pushing them apart. And a friend of mine gave me this linen tape that is actually very similar to the originals. Her mother was a nurse a while back, and this is some sort of linen tape that they use in the medical field. And it is actually very close to the original, so we're going to use this. Now over towards the center, I should have made eyelets, and I completely forgot, so I didn't feel like doing them now. So I'm just going to poke it through and hope for the best. On the next one I will do eyelets. But it's very hard to do eyelets on just one layer and not through all the layers. And so I would have to like take this out, flip it up, do the eyelets, and then put it back. And I don't feel like doing that. So we're going to leave it like this. So I'm just going to poke it through. And then I've just been stitching this down. So the original shows that too. It's not finished anyway. It's just left raw and just stitched down really, really well. And these ends are not finished either. In fact, they were actually unraveling on the original. Not terribly bad, but enough where I would think that she would want to finish it, but here, right here. Alright, I'm going to put the other tie on, and then we'll try this one on. Here we are. So it turned out really cute. Under our gussets, it's a little tight, but that was a measuring issue, so I shall fix that. And the next one, I'll just make the gusset slightly bigger, and we'll be fine. But here's the original shift. I don't think I've actually shown you the entire thing. The cords are all kind of bunched up in there, and they've kind of been lost before I got it. So they're in there. I just haven't pulled them out yet. So that's why it kind of fits oddly on her. This lady kind of had a tall torso. Not really a torso, but her shoulders are really tall. Because how low everything sits here. It's very interesting to kind of study body shapes. And I didn't really notice that about her until I got her on the mannequin. But this is her. She's quite long. The lady probably was taller than both myself and Edith. Probably several inches taller at least. Because this thing probably goes to Edith's shins if she had shins. She doesn't. Which is where this one goes on me. But I think the next one I'm going to make slightly shorter. But overall, I'm very happy with how it turned out. So I don't mind the fact that it fits off the shoulder so much. It's actually not a big deal. Hers wants to fit off the shoulder. Whether that doesn't fit her or what's going on, I don't know. But I'm fine with this because this will actually be really nice for like evening gowns and such too. So I don't have an issue with that. It is gathery. It's a little bit more gathery I think than hers would have been. But I have a wider bust and kind of like narrow shoulders-ish. And so it's going to need to be gathered quite a bit up here and of course in the back as well. I mean, it's gathery, But it fits really well. Like it fits all over the hips, and it's not super tight anywhere. I can move it down a little bit so you can see. But yeah, you can kind of see where it ends on you. So where it ends on me, I actually got the height pretty decent. I'm slightly shorter than Edith, so so the chemise itself is a little bit shorter, but than the original. But I'm happy with it. I think it looks okay. I am just very happy and thrilled that we got this done. It actually isn't as long as I thought it was going to be. But I am just so super thrilled to have this done, and it's been something I've been looking forward to for a very long time, to get this kind of patterned out and worked on. So I'm very thrilled that I had the time to do it and got to take it all along with me on the journey, because I think it's always better, I think, when y'all can see the originals and the reproductions like side by side. I think that just really helps. And it helps me a lot to know what period techniques there are, because every other step I was pausing and going, wait, how does she do this? Whereas sometimes I try to just kind of rush through things, and I'm like, oh, well, this is how this is done. And there are usually a couple different ways to do things, and I usually know what is the most common way of doing things that I've seen in most originals, because that sticks in my head. After I've seen it 4, 5, 6 times, it sticks in my head that, oh, this is how we do this. But sometimes people have different ways of doing things, and so copying an original sometimes messes with my brain of, this is how I'm used to having things done, whereas this is what we're actually going to be doing for this particular garment. So it was a fun study, and I'm very excited to have it. I'll take you all along with me and to get it complete. So if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you, and as always, have a fantastic week, and I will see you back here on Monday.